just want to say first, thank you so much for this opportunity. I teach 6th grade at Augur Costal, and some of my amazing students are in the audience this evening, excited to present to you their ideas. And so we are just so honored and thankful to Mrs. Scully for allowing us the opportunity to share with you what some of our 6th graders here in the community have ideas about coastal erosion. So we'll start with the first slide, kind of a little bit of the background or driving scenario. So students completed what we consider a weathering, erosion, and deposition unit. So we discussed the differences between weathering, erosion, and we really understood the science behind it. So students were then asked at the very end of this unit, knowing the scientific background that they had, to design a coastal action plan here in Carlsbad. And we know we are incredibly grateful to live right near the beach here in Carlsbad, and so many students have noticed the change in the coastline, and they have seen the dredging that happens on our beaches. And so I challenged them to actually create an action plan for city board members, and we were not sure we'd actually get to present it to you, so this is very exciting for all of us, for them to get to present their ideas to you beyond the classroom walls. But their job was to come up with an action plan, to come up with ideas to help stop some of the coastal erosion here in Carlsbad beaches. So we started with looking at a case study with the Santa Barbara beaches and looking at how they were using sand spits in different ways to transport the sand. And so we worked in groups. I had over 45 lab table groups work on their presentation. So what you're seeing is a combination of all of their ideas kind of blended together. And they were, again, creating action plans to stop some coastal erosion. I asked them to consider both the positive and the negative aspects of their ideas. I also asked them to keep in mind the essence of Carlsbad and what we stand for as a city. And so what you'll see is some of their ideas have the positive and the negative in there. So if you don't mind, you can see I asked them to give me a purpose. So some of the groups selected a specific beach to focus on in their coastal erosion. So you'll see some of the beaches are represented like Tamarack, Ponto, and so they really wanted to be specific on what was happening. So they researched what was happening in the actual taking of the sand and dredging. So we researched the lagoon and what was happening and how the desalination plant was going to work with this. So there's a lot of research done in this process, and then we went in and actually wrote their action plans. So this next couple of slides are their actual plans. So these are from the 6th graders of Augur Middle School in my class. Some of them actually drew their ideas for you, so you can kind of get an idea of some of their ideas. But we'll start with the first one. Many students had the idea of adding a jetty, an additional jetty into the lagoon. They proposed that the sand then would be carried along. We talked about the idea of longshore drift, and so students proposed that the jetty perhaps would slow down this process and allow some of the sand to continue to be added onto Carlsbad beaches. And so they also considered the cost of that, so we did have them consider the positive and negatives. So they talked about how the jetty would perhaps slow down some of the sand and actually allow it to come on shore, but they also noted the expense and that eventually that jetty would erode itself from the wave erosion that we had studied. So a big idea for them was the jetty addition on a couple of the beaches. The next solution was breakers. So we had a couple of ideas. We studied how breakers affected the Santa Barbara harbor, and then we looked at it in terms of Carlsbad. Since there's not a specific harbor there, we looked at ways that breakers in different ways could be established on our Carlsbad beaches. So some of the groups perhaps said that they could use it to stop some of the waves and the force, and then maybe some of that sand would be then saved for the beaches. And they thought it would stabilize it. I liked that they said cultural and economic-wise, it wouldn't be the most attractive. So I liked that they were thinking very creative in how that was going to look on our beach. The next idea was a similar idea. They thought an alternative solution would be actually an underwater breakwater, which we haven't really seen in many cities, but there's several groups that thought actually building some underwater wave kind of contraptions would help erode some of that in the ocean and prevent some of that sand from going onto the beaches. And they also noted that there wouldn't need to be as much materials for this, but that could be an alternative to a breakwater up above the water. The next one was an idea. Students made the idea of using seawalls to create another way to kind of prevent the sand from going into the lagoon and dredging it back out. And so this group said that we'd have to repair it if there were cracks done by the forces of the waves, but that in some ways would help and make sure the sand didn't get into the lagoons. There were several groups that thought an additional seawall here in Carlsbad might perhaps allow for less coastal erosion. This group drew, this is actually a unique invention done. This is drawn up using Google Drawing. And so this is a really kind of interesting idea. It might, again, they did say it could take a little bit longer to build and a lot of materials. But however, you can see this group decided that there could be some sort of a tubing system out in the beaches, and that during it, and I like that they have an on and off switch, that would protect animals and other people from being sucked into these tubes, but however, it would pump the sand back onto the beaches. So a brand new invention, perhaps, for later years, but I thought that was very creative. And there was a warning sign that you done it that. So they're all about safety. Another group thought about building a thick rock wall halfway under the water, so they did kind of a hybrid idea to bring the sand back into the ocean. And the positive said they would make more sand and less erosion, but they thought the negatives that wall would eventually erode. And then you see a similar idea in the next idea. They thought of another breakwater. They, again, mentioned the Santa Barbara research we had done and what the Santa Barbara Harbor had actually looked at. And they decided that it might be a good idea to build kind of a similar breakwater in that area. So they diagrammed that as well. The next one, again, they are pretty good at Google Drawing. I have to give them credit for that. This is, again, an original idea, conveyor belt. So, again, getting some of the electronics in the water. I think I have some future engineers and inventors in my class, so they have some neat ideas about this. This group thought perhaps a conveyor belt exactly 2 miles off from shore could somehow actually transport some of that sand back onto our beaches here in Carlsbad. And then a lot of the groups also suggested groins. We did a lot of research on coastal ways that we can keep the beaches in excellent condition. So not only did we talk about breakwaters and jetties and seawalls, groins was another suggestion. So this group thought perhaps adding an additional groin at either the Tamarack or Ponto Beach, again, might prevent coastal erosion. And then this group as well, you can't really see it, but they've decided to do some angular breakwaters across the water at Ponto. And again, preventing some of that beach erosion. And the beach goers are very happy, as you can see. So they're happy about all the sand that is on Carlsbad beaches. So these are the sources that we used in order to do our research. We wanted to make sure we were maintaining scholarly academic work. So we made sure that we found really good and reliable sources. And you can see we used the San Diego Union Tribune article on the current dredging that just finished a couple months ago. So students were really excited to see the current stuff that's happening, and even more excited that you wanted to hear some of their ideas. So perhaps in the future you might have some future civil engineers or just inventors with great ideas here in Carlsbad. So thank you so much again for your time. I have some really smart people out there excited to hear your ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Crawford. Any comments or questions from the commission? I have one comment. I work with Mrs. Crawford. I support one of her classes that when she first put this up and we were talking about this project that she was doing, and she had actually put in the instructions that the kids were going to, as a joke initially, was that they were going to present it to the commission. And I said, well, you know what? I said, I'm actually the chair of the commission. I said, we might be able to make that happen. So I want to thank actually Mr. New, because when I presented it to him, he didn't go, are you really, Victoria, do you really want to do this? But he was absolutely supportive from the moment that I brought it to him, and I want to thank him for that. And to also say that the kids did a fabulous job. Actually, we have a number of our students that are in the audience. If you guys would love to stand up so that we can recognize you and give you some applause. And also any of the students that I think are watching us live via the podcast. So,
many of them are tuning in live.
Exactly. So thank you very much. You guys did a great job. And as always, it's a pleasure working with Mrs. Crawford. She's always comes up with some fabulous, innovative projects. Commissioner Stickler.
Well, I just want to say thank you, because this is really a big, it's a problem. It's a problem that needs to be solved. And please don't stop now. Keep working on it. We need you to. Thank you very much.